Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show once again, MK Ultra, satanic ritual abuse, and organized abuse survivor, overcomer and thriver, loving mother, published writer and author, content creator and podcaster, physician and radiologist turned activist, founder of the Angel Coalition and co-founder of Women and Children First and the Babushka Brigade, Starfort enthusiast, award winner of the University of Washington School of Medicine's prestigious Humanitarian Award, podcast regular on this show, and one of my dearest friends, Dr. Juliette Engel. If you're new here, missed any of Juliette's past episodes, or if you need a short refresher, here's a brief synopsis of her life and a little bit about what we will be talking about today. In the heart of the 1950s America, where the CIA's MK Ultra program spun mind control, sexual torment, and satanic ritual abuse through hidden annexes, 6-year-old Juliette was sold by her OSS-CIA-NSA-linked father. Raped before him as he took payment and sneered, "This is what I raised you for," her innocence shattered in a crucible of torture meant to break her mind for evil ends. Yet a divine spark endured. As a teenager, barefoot and amnestic from trauma, she escaped. With unbreakable will, she earned her medical degree, built a thriving radiology practice in Seattle, and won acclaim for her compassion. In 1992, finding the Miramed Institute in Moscow to advance women's and children's rights, she uncovered state orphanages trafficking girls, triggering memories of her own sex magic abuse and igniting a lifelong war on the modern slave trade. From pain rose purpose. Her groundbreaking memoir, Sparky, Surviving Sex Magic, sequel, Angels Over Moscow, and thriller, Moscow Traffic, exposed truth and organized crime. Anchored by her grandmother's Lord's Prayer and faith in Christianity's power against darkness, she launched Protect Our Children, rallying communities to fight U.S. child sex trafficking, the world's top consumer, through local action and transparency. Juliette's revelation extends to star forts, ancient star-shaped bastions engineered with sacred geometry, harmonic acoustics, and telluric energy amplification. These structures, scattered across the United States, Russia, and worldwide, were not mere defenses, but thought to be advanced energy nodes in a pre-reset global grid. And this fascinating topic is what we will be discussing today: the history and relevance of star forts and how they've intertwined into Juliette's life, memories, art, advocacy, and the world around us. This is a topic that has never been discussed in depth on this podcast before, and I'm very excited for Juliette to do a deep dive with us on this hidden history that is a piece of the puzzle and unexpectedly has direct ties to things like mind control and advanced technology, things we hear about often in survivor testimonies. You'll want to stick around for this groundbreaking episode. Despite death threats and exposing pedophilia's grip on government, academia, entertainment, and law enforcement, shielded by complicit agencies and media, Juliette remains undaunted. Her investigations, backed by National Security Archive's 2024 CIA admissions to drug experiments, torture, and behavioral modification, see hope and awareness in action for a global reckoning. Juliette is a living miracle, a radiant soul who transformed trauma into sacred mission. Through writing, speaking, and advocacy, she shines as a beacon, proving chains shatter under truth, faith, and love. Her story isn't biography, it's a thunderous call. Confront evil, protect the innocent, and reclaim humanity's soul. In a world under oppressive mind control, Juliette's voice echoes eternally. We are pure souls, connected to the divine. The light always prevails. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being guest on the show, if you want to share any information privately with me, or if you are interested in submitting a written testimony to be featured in a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabouterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. I've also recently started up my third YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle @Imagination Podcast Official, and I'm streaming new episode premieres there weekly. Turn on your notifications and join our loving community in the live chats every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Central Time. Thank you on the other side of the screen wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on this show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming back today's guest of honor, survivor and whistleblower, warrioress, voice for the voiceless, selfless humanitarian, hero, public speaker, anti-child trafficking and survivor advocate, absolute badass, woman of God, and walking miracle, the one, the only, Dr. Juliette Engel. Dr. Juliette, it is so great to have you back. I always love whenever you're on, and so does my audience.
Well, I'd love to be known as the badass woman of God.
You are. You really are.
I think those things have to go together. Yeah.
They really do. Yes. You're totally a warrior of his army.
Yeah. Emma and I were having one of many long discussions about the importance of this channel. The fact that Emma has been taking hundreds. I mean, it's a huge resource that is absolutely precious and irreplaceable. She's taking the stories of survivors of the worst forms of abuse, and abuse that was put into these beings, these small human beings, these children, non-verbally, spiritually, transdimensionally, all these ways that are non-verbal. So their experience in their bodies is body memory, which is why it's so traumatic when it starts releasing and coming out. It's because the body remembers. And the tremendous effort that it takes for these people, plus the effort that Emma makes to get these stories translated from the nonverbal into the verbal, and then to record them in English, a human language, which has its limits and structures. And that's a tremendous feat, because the programs themselves are multidimensional. And I was mentioning to Emma, I've been thinking about the reasons behind why in the early 1950s did a group of very, very powerful people, and we're discovering that these were people from many, many countries around the world, who got their hands on the material that was collected and experimented on, and then collected by the German scientists, who were the top in the world on mind control and biological experimentation and biowarfare, how they got their hands on all this research at the end of the war, when they all met together in Nuremberg. So Nuremberg was a meeting place where the Nazi scientists bought and bargained over masses, really 100 years of experimentation, and then their final experimentation in the concentration camps, which included torture, satanic abuse, all forms of abuse that had been collected from esoteric teachings, from pagan cultures, from transdimensional experimentation in societies. All this, they had this all. And the 12 evil men, I just have to call them that, which included my uncles, met with them in Nuremberg and realized or saw this as the golden ticket, not as men who should be executed for mass crimes against the human race, not as evil material that no human being should know or attempt to use on another human being or extremely dangerous biological information that could potentially destroy the world. No, they saw that as an enormous source of power for themselves. And in that mix was MIT and the newly collected and collated files from Tesla, who'd recently died, and his material was curated by John Trump, Donald Trump's uncle. So you had the results of his experimentation, plus the Nazi collection of experimentation, plus a collection of men who had formed the Office of Strategic Services, which was the precursor to the CIA. It had always been a cozy little club of secret societies and very wealthy men from Yale and Harvard, and they never had to work for a living. These were the bored, sexually ambiguous elite from the descendants from the royal families. So they all came together and they realized that here was a huge amount of power. Now, did they decide to use that power for good? No, they decided to use that to create programs for, well, I don't know what all they did, but I know that at least 1,500 of those scientists were brought to Huntsville, Alabama, and then redistributed around the United States and set up in what they called CIA safe houses. And this is all in the documents, which will be listed in the post notes or the show notes underneath the broadcast, to experiment on American children, and to not only experiment, but to create mind-controlled Manchurian candidates out of their own children. And I was one of those children. So let's get some dates here. The CIA was formed in 1947. Nuremberg took place between 1947 and 1949. 1953, the MK Ultra program was started after they'd brought the Nazi scientists to the United States and set up laboratories across the country. In 1955, I was put in the program. So 1953, it started. By 1955, the elite, my uncle was one of the founders of the National Security Agency, and I was the firstborn in that group of my family, and they put me in the program. So, and that was pretty typical. They took their own children, and I've talked in other broadcasts, and other people have talked about the kinds of torture that we were put through, the tremendous amount of violence and intimidation and sexual harassment, well, flat out abuse, starvation, and what's been amazing to me over the past year, and working with Emma and other people who are beginning to come forward from other countries, is that this was worldwide. And I recently did a global roundtable with people from Australia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, UK, Canada, and the United States. And the programming was, we were all about the same age. The programming was pretty much identical. So they were working off of a playbook. This was a coordinated international effort. I also know that it went on in Russia. We'll include Russia in the next round of roundtable that we do. So why were they doing this? What was this for? And out of this came, these Nuremberg pardons, these dividing up of thousands of scientists in all kinds of fields, in medicine and in engineering and in weapons and airplanes and all this. This was all going on. I can only speak to the 1,500 or so that created the MK Ultra program, because that's my firsthand experience. But what were they looking for? Why were they doing this? What did they think? Were they sacrificing us as their children, or I think that did they consider making their children into Manchurian candidates was a thing of honor for the family? I don't know. Other survivors have been able to produce documents that show that families were paid for us. So my father was paid for me. I saw him receiving money, but apparently that was a long-term thing. So they were paid for. They sold us. We were trafficked. So they were trafficking their own children. Why? I'm still not entirely sure, but I'm going to start exploring with other survivors. We're looking at the places that we were taken, what we did, what we were looking at, what kinds of what as they broke us apart, which is the dissociative identity part of the mind control programming. What did that give us? Particular skills or abilities, or the trauma, the repeated trauma made us extremely psychic, and it made it. I'm so comfortable with my own psychic readings of things that I can travel to places in other languages, and it makes no difference to me if I'm speaking English or I'm listening to some other language, because I'm not listening to the language. I'm like listening to something else. So we were taught to live a dissociated life, and the dissociated life is the transference of the body's energetic life and spiritual life out of the physical life, because the physical life, they made it so unbearable, so painful, so frightening, so ghastly, disgusting, that they drove the energetic and the spiritual body, out of the physical body. And that, I'm very sure that a great deal of what we were doing was then traveling transdimensionally and traveling in time and space. Now, those are words, and those words are two-dimensional. They're English. They're confined by the meaning that you have and that I have when speaking this. If we did this purely experientially and psychically, we wouldn't be talking. We'd be experiencing the transdimensional. And again, transdimensional, what does that mean? So there's an entirely experiential level to this, and this is what was going on, I believe. I know in one particular case, I was about 7 years old, and they took over 30 kids to a beach in Mexico. This was Rosarita Beach, and we lived like Lord of the Flies, like feral animals in our underpants, running around the beach for I don't know how long enough to be completely blackened by the sun, and my hair, which had never been cut, was so tangled and dirty and full of salt and sand that they had to shave it off. So, but what were they doing? Who were these people? Well, for one thing, it was the governor of California was down there periodically. There were senators, there were scientists, there were, and they had with them a book, and the book was we were told this was Mein Kampf. This was the epitome of the Nazi research, and we were there to communicate with extraterrestrials and to open portals. But the entire thing was nonverbal, and we were expected to know what we were expected to do, and we were just expected to do it. So I've heard, again, it's difficult to take the nonverbal and translate it into the verbal and then communicate it to you as something that's nonverbal. So did we do that? Yeah, we did that. And it required the drawing out of the energetic body from the human body, the transfer into another space, and a return. And in the return, we were expected to bring other entities back with us that were then kept by the adults in the room. I don't know. I don't know what they did, because we weren't fed until we did that. So unless we performed, we weren't fed. So we were starving. All these little starving naked kids on the beach, expected to understand what was being told us telepathically. And if we could do that, we got some food. If we couldn't do that, we didn't get food. And a lot of kids died in the process because it was so traumatic and frightening, and it's very, very hard on your human body. And your human body, as soon as the energetic body is out of it, starts to die. The process of dissociation, where you mentally, that's your spirit leaving your body, but it stays around your body. You don't leave it completely. The process of taking your energetic body out of your body starts to kill you. Now, to get from there to Starforts, there's in the importance of taking this. Okay, well, I'm going to go to the next step, which is, okay, 30 years later, 20 years later, actually, after I'd escaped from the MK Ultra program, I put myself through college, medical school. I couldn't remember anything from 17 earlier. It was just all a complete blank. I didn't know I'd been programmed. I didn't know I'd been in MK Ultra. I really didn't know that until about 50 years later. But at that time, my daughter was born, and I had this little copy of myself in my hands that was completely dependent on me. And that's when you have to remember, okay, how do you take care of this little thing? And what came to me was so ghastly, so awful, so absolutely horrifying that if I thought for 1 minute I was going to do that to my own child, I would have killed myself. And I went to a psychiatrist that I'd known in medical school. So he was someone that I trusted. I knew he was very smart. And I flat out asked him, "Am I crazy?" And if he said yes, I would have just done it. I was all set. I was just going to eliminate myself for the sake of my daughter. And he looked at me. He'd known me for quite a while. He said, "Well, you're overachiever, hyperactive." I mean, he went through all these things I couldn't argue with. And then he said, "But you're not crazy. You couldn't do what you've done and be crazy. You're not crazy. We need to go through this and start sorting this out." Of course, we had no chance of sorting this out, really, because at that point, this would be 1980. The only information that had come out about MK Ultra had been rigorously suppressed, and there was no reason to think I'd been in it. So he said, "Okay, let's start. What do you remember about your mother?" And that was a total trigger, since I remembered nothing. Nothing. I still don't remember anything. And I couldn't remember my father either. And so he said, "Okay, well, draw yourself. Draw what's going on with you." So can you pull up the drawing? So this is the drawing that I made in 1980. I was 30 years old, and that's me. So I came back the next week with this drawing, and he looked at it. He said, "Well, we've got a lot of work to do." And in looking back at this, 1980, so that was 50 years ago. It's I'm still sorting through this, because this is exactly what being an MK Ultra victim is. You're in there, you're a prisoner inside yourself, and you are completely coated with all of these traumatic experiences and awful people and evil memories, but it's all outside of you, pressing in. And this I realize now is the fractionation of my own mind. So MK Ultra survivors have dissociative, it's called dissociative identity disorder. It's a survival mechanism for children undergoing extreme trauma. You block it out, forget it completely. It's still in your mind. So to get to any form of memories, you have to activate, for me anyway, I have to activate these little kids, and they have to go open the door that connects to the memories, which are out here somewhere. And so I've drawn dissociative identity disorder perfectly. I'm trying to escape and reach God. I don't have a clear idea of what God is, but I know it's not in here. And these symbols were the repeated symbols that they were always on everything associated with anything that was done to us. And I think it's so interesting. I'm clearly, are you able to see my pointer, or does that not come through?
I don't see it on my end.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm
Weird.
standing on top of a structure, and the structure, if you look at it carefully, it really is a star. So I'm standing on top of a star. I'm reaching for the esoteric symbols in the sky. I'm trapped by all the garbage and goop that is from my memory and my life and my past and the things that were done to me but aren't me. And I hadn't at that time ever been to the Statue of Liberty, but can you go to the Statue of Liberty?
Mm-hmm.
So someone pointed this out much later, that I've actually drawn the Statue of Liberty, which is on top of a star fort.
So interesting.
Yeah, and star forts became unknowingly a very big part of my life. I mean, even to the symbols that are on top of the structure, which I had never seen. In fact, it's very hard to see because you'd have to be in a plane above it. And we were never so aware of star forts until there were drones, and you could get drone pictures of above cities and fortresses and lumps in the earth that nobody knew what they were. You know, once you fly drones, you can see that there are structures there. And these star forts were there before the settlers came, before the pilgrims came. They certainly weren't built by Native Americans. And they're huge. I mean, if you could see the scale, the tiny, tiny little white dots there are cars. So this structure underneath the Statue of Liberty, which is a star fort, is enormous. Okay, so we'll set that aside. That's there. That's in my past. So 1980, I was standing on a star fort, drew myself on a star fort without ever having realized. I've never been to the Statue of Liberty. I still haven't. But I then in life started traveling. And everywhere I traveled, I would find the walls of a city, the walls of a church, the walls of some kind of fortress or structure, and walk all the way around them. And for years, I did that. I've done that to dozens and dozens of cities and structures and walls. And this was before drones even were available. But then a few years ago, the pictures that were produced by drones started coming out. And I've been seeking out and walking around star forts. So can we bring up the star fort? Someone has done an incredible collection of illustrations of star forts. And I've got the link to the website here, and I recommend you go look at this. There it is. It's starforts.com. And this person has gone all over the world and recorded star forts. And they have similar characteristics. They're huge. The walls are enormous and thick. And the building blocks are way beyond anything human. Human beings did not build these structures. And you look at an island like Puerto Rico, the entire island is composed of star forts. And Malta, likewise, the entire island is made up of star forts. huge staircases, enormous doors, tunnels everywhere. Um, and during the time that I lived in Russia between 1990 and 2010, I also walked around dozens of star forts. Every major Russian city is founded on a star fort. Every major American city is founded on a star fort. You'll find them. Cahokia in Illinois is a star fort that links to St. Louis, which is another star fort, which is all connected by the area where the Manhattan Project took place. And they were using materials and energy sources that came from that star fort. So our entire planet is covered by these impossible structures that human beings didn't make, that provide water, electricity, power all over Russia. They provide oil, gas, the elements that are used for fertilizer. They're sources of energy, light, water, food, life. And I have no idea why I was so completely attracted to them, to the point where I had to walk around them and over them and the walls of them, and what the link is. But I think there is a transdimensional link. I think that it's in terms of human survival and our ability to survive the next catastrophic event, which is coming, the next extinction event on Earth. We need to understand and decode what this means and how this is all linked, because it is all linked. I don't have the answers, but I want everyone to think about that. And people who have a connection in this way will think about it. And again, in order to communicate as human beings, we have to take the nonverbal and process it and translate it into language so that we can create a common map. So this is an incredible website. I mean, these structures are just amazing. And also there are some other websites, and I'll give those to Emma to put up. So Emma, what do you think?
In your research, are many star forts public, or have a lot of them been made into private property or facilities that people cannot go on?
It's both.
Yeah.
Around the United States, there are lots and lots of public ones. You can go Fort Henry, Fort McHenry, in Augustine, Florida, there's one. There's one in Norfolk. There's one in Virginia Beach. There's one all up and down the East Coast. There are star forts. Also, all over the West Coast, the Golden Gate Bridge was built on top of a star fort, and you can. It shows in the movie North by Northwest. You can see parts of it. So this is there's many more, but I think the ones that he lists here are pretty much public. However, there are many that have been used, that have been turned into military bases, particularly in the western part of the United States, in the desert there. Multiple military bases are put on top of them, data centers. Google has its data center. Bitcoin does energy mining out of star forts, so those are blocked off. And in fact, in Google Earth, you used to be able to find the star forts, but now they're blurred out because they've been taken over by data centers and military bases. So the defense industry understands how important these are. If you look at the city of Chicago and you look at the waterworks, actually in Chicago, St. Louis, and you look at inside the waterworks, they're ancient, and they are obviously built by some other civilization, and they have a commonality in design. And let's see, and I can send you some pictures. I did a walking tour of the waterworks of Chicago, and you can see the star fort features. They're actually under the city. So they'd explain, where is the city's water coming from? Well, it's coming from the star fort which is under the city, and they don't really know where that water is coming from. So, so, so we don't live in a very certain world, and we are surrounded by structures that weren't built by us. That are There's also a huge number of sunken cities, like in the Gulf of America, what it's called now, down along Louisiana. There are sunken cities with roads, buildings, highways, all out of scale to anything that humans would have built. And also in the Florida Keys, there are sunken cities. And then many of the islands are clearly star forts. They claim that these forts were built by revolutionary soldiers. No, these were there already, and we don't know who built them. So I don't know. It's one of Earth's mysteries, and I think because of the connections in my own mind, I'm saying that somehow all of this is connected together. And although I don't have the answers, I know that they are connected. And I never would have drawn that drawing from when I was 30 years old that looked like the Star Fort, the Statue of Liberty, and then spent my life walking around Star Forts before we even could see them without there being a significance to that. So I'm sort of opening the world discussion.
It's a really fascinating topic because, like you said, I know that there's so many more that are likely not on this website, but the publisher and researcher on this website, literally all of them in the United States are pretty much, the majority of them are military bases, which to me connects directly already to obviously government, but MK Ultra, how many testimonies do you hear where children are taken to military bases and used for psychic experiments or some type of energetic experiments, combat, all these different things, all the conditioning.
And tunnels.
Yes, and tunnels.
There are huge tunnel systems associated with each one of these. And it makes perfect sense that they connect. And so if the defense industry understands the significance of these, I'm not sure they do. Having been through that program, I'm not sure there's a great deal of intelligence in intelligence. So I think, and this was an intelligence that far exceeded human intelligence that built these things. But if you look at like in Mesopotamia, you look at the Star Fort in in Sumer, the pyramids there are clearly star forts. The tells throughout Israel, the raised like islands in the desert where cities were built on top of, everyone is a star fort. Every city along the Novgorod, along the Volga River, as Russia became settled, was a star fort. They're all over Ukraine. So maybe, and there are people there, clearly they exist in Antarctica. They've been outlined in Antarctica, and it could be that entire islands are made up of interlocking star forts. So I don't know. So I'm eager to hear what other people have to say about this. And I wish I knew more. I don't. But
it's extremely fascinating, especially considering how many people that were in the same programs as you were likely taken to one and didn't realize it and might still not realize it. They might know the military base that they were taken to or the location and might not realize that they too were being experimented on in or around these star forts, and that maybe they've been around a lot of other survivors more frequently than they think. It's amazing how public these are, and even how the Statue of Liberty is created on one, and so it's also, there's so many of them. You have to wonder too, is this sort of an intelligent communication system that somehow is bound together? I mean, what is the significance? You could see having one or two, but I mean, all of these, what is the significance of so many of them? And then being in such prominent places that seem to be maybe energetic ley lines as well, or places that have some type of recognized energy that maybe they're trying to utilize for whatever the star forts were being used for with the energy.
Yeah, they're clearly using it for Bitcoin manufacture. That takes a lot of energy, and they're using it for AI. The AI data centers are built on top of a series of star forts. So it's the connection is clearly there. So that's I can't go much farther with that except to raise those questions. And
When you were a child, do you remember being taken to any of them specifically and used for any type of energy work or psychic work?
easily. However, before drones, people like you and I would never know that they were there. You're just taken in a tunnel. I was in lots of tunnels. You're just taken into some dungeony place and experimented on. That happened all the time. That could have been in any one of these structures. So it really isn't until drones, maps, and something like this incredible website came out that you could even know they were there, because the walls are like 100 feet high. So this isn't a structure you would just trip over. This is like these are walls. And if you look at the structure of Puerto Rico and look at it from above, you can see all the starfort, interlocking starfort features that comprise an island which rises up out of the water several hundred feet. So these are enormous. And Malta also, these enormous walls that come out of the sea, and they all have that little clover leaf structure. They all have a distinct look to them. But what they mean, what those symbols mean, what those structures are. In fact, it's probably, given my attraction to them, it's probably highly likely that we were experimented on. I wonder if Camp Hero was a star fort, the Montauk, particularly Highness. They were all Highness, but the number of children that were killed at Camp Hero they're now exploring it, taking DNA samples from the soil, looking for the children who were buried there.
And that's what I was going to comment on, the interesting shape of these structures, and not just the structure itself, but sort of the land that it's on, the way that they carve it out with these very interesting angles, 90-degree angles, 45-degree angles, 30-degree angles. It's not sort of your typical property that's cookie cutter square. It's very interesting in how a lot of these actual buildings, that one looks like an arrow. Some of them look like a star or a triangle type structure or some type of just very interesting shape. Do you, for it to be called a star fort, is there any significance in your life? Because even in that photo, you didn't only draw a star fort that you were standing on, but there's a star up in the sky too, which is interesting. Do stars have any significance in your life, or do you remember them being a part of any type of symbology or meaning?
Oh yeah, I think very much so. And then we get to the book of Revelation, where I think that John is talking about these in the first 4 chapters of Revelation. And I think that those chapters tell us a huge amount about the connections between what's above and what's below. And he talks about he always talking about the 7 churches of Asia. Each one of those is a star fort. And each one of those was a great city at the time of John. And each one had if you looked at it, it had enormous structures, huge buildings, enormous temples, beautiful artwork, way beyond anything that any human being had built. And they were theoretically built hundreds of years before Christ. So these temples existed in the distant past. And the time John was writing about them, they were thriving communities and the centers of life of Asia. And he was warning them. He said, he saw an angel holding 7 stars, and the 7 stars are thrown to earth, and they become the 7 churches, and they're each given a lampstand with a light. But if you don't keep the light lit and you don't follow your beliefs and the teachings of Christ, you become dust, which they did. They all became dust, and except for Pergamon. Pergamon was, thanks to the Nazis, this is pre-Nazi, but the Germans were very interested in collecting anything that was esoteric or might have mystical power. And they visited the 7 churches of Asia, and they discovered that they could pretty much buy Pergamon. So they took the entire altar of Pergamon, which was noted in Revelation as the seat of Satan, and they took it to Berlin, and it's in Berlin now. And you can look it up. There's the Berlin Museum, the Temple of the Altar of Pergamon, and you can see how enormous this was. This incredible structures that existed at that time, and this is at the time of Jesus. They were thriving metropolises, and then within 300 years of the death of Jesus, they were all dust mostly because of earthquakes and wars and destruction. But it must have seemed like they were eternal at the time. But they're all star forts, and you take the drones and you go above Ephesus, you go above Smyrna, you go above Laodicea, and you can see the star fort structure under there. So, so how did John know that? How could he talk about the fact that these are stars that have fallen to earth and are only kept alive by the golden lampstand? What exactly does that mean? People interpret that as meaning faith. I don't know what that means. Some kind of energetic connection or spiritual connection. What? But I think the first three verses of Revelation are hugely important. Enormous amount of coded material in there. And it's interesting that the Pergamon Museum, which is in Berlin, which is on an island in the middle of the river, in the middle of Berlin, was closed in 2023 and isn't opening again until 2045. Why? So right now, Pergamon is all locked up.
Wow.
And it's intact. The rest of them are dust. I've been to every other one, and they are just a few columns or a bit of a marketplace. Or Ephesus, they're digging out ruins, but it's ruins, and it was built over by the Romans. So there was a great intelligence here long before us. And is it still here? Is it consuming children? Is this why humans are being enslaved and consumed this way? I don't know.
That's what I was going to ask you. I know you aren't conclusive in your sort of guess as to what these could be used for, but you've done a lot of research. What are some things that you've read that they could potentially have been used for or created by in your own research?
Well, they produce energy, and they produce water. They produce in Ukraine, they produce gas. So they could be, I think there are a variety of different star forts for different purposes, but I think a lot of them are producing resources that any kind of life on this planet would need. And they may have preceded life on this planet. They may have been created. That's why the forms are almost like if you send different frequencies through water and different kinds of materials, you create stars and you create geometric forms. And that might have been how they were initially created on this planet, and then engineered so that they produced water, they produced electricity, they produced power. The way the ley lines are set up and the way electrical grids are designed also link them to star forts. So I don't know if that's accidental. I think the secret societies, the Masons got into them and discovered a lot of their secrets, how they were built, how the masonry was joined. We still can't cut stone like that. We can't move stone like that. We can't build flawless walls that don't need any joining. But they were built. They've been there for tens of thousands of years, and they're still there. So the knowledge of how to build things like cathedrals and walled cities and came from people getting down into these things and analyzing, smart enough to analyze what this was. And so you had people in the holy city getting down into the star forts, coming up and then realizing that they had star forts back in France too. This is during the Crusades, it's assuming that this is when a lot of the secret societies got started, because they discovered the secrets of these things and realized that they could do the same kind of building on top of the star forts in their own land. So they went back and built cities and castles and cathedrals, and you'll find that they're all built on top of the star forts that were already there. So that gave them unique knowledge, gave them a leg up in terms of defense, weaponry, sources of energy. If they control the water, they control the land. So I think that's how that happened. But how these things, but then they can't, then they can only go so far because of human limitations. And I don't see that we've gone really any farther. We've got AI, but AI is just garbage in, garbage out a little faster. It's still human information in, human information out, apparently edited and censored by some liberal arts graduate from Amherst, so it's not going to be revelatory. It'll be useful, but you can't expect miracles from it. So that's the things that bother me at night. What are these? And
They're
we can
so
keep talking about. Oh, it's fascinating. You should look through. Look at Malta. Look at Puerto Rico. Just start looking through the channels that go there and walk through these things. They are just astonishing, and they are so clearly not built by human beings. And so,
how are they producing energy and water?
That's the secret knowledge. I think the secret societies, if they knew how they were doing it, kept it a secret. But it's interesting that the Manhattan Project was built right on top of one. And in fact, it's built on a place where three of them come together, and the water comes out of one of them. They knew it was there. They used it. I don't know if human beings need to understand this if human beings are to survive.
Yeah, it's like just a self-sustaining, kind of indestructible property and structure. To think about how long these have been around, that they're potentially referenced in the Bible, to go all the way back there, to think that these preceded what we have in our biblical text, and that they're still here today functioning, they're still standing. There's so many of them. It's not, it's interesting how so many structures historically have been demolished, and they've corroded, they've eroded, they've been destroyed. Whatever had happened to them, there's been so much of our history that has been destroyed throughout that time, but these seem very intact.
Well, take a look. A lot of them have been torn apart and built over and flooded over.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sort of half buried, like the Golden Gate Bridge was built on top of one. So they broke it in half to set the pilings, and you can see it in the movie North by Northwest. There's a scene where he's standing there looking out over the bay, or maybe it's Vertigo, I don't know, one of those movies, and you can see he's standing at the point of the Star Fort that overlooks San Francisco Bay. Yeah, now that you know what they look like, you're going to start seeing them. It's like looking for red Volkswagens. We used to play this game traveling, whoever sees a red Volkswagen gets a penny. And then you start seeing red Volkswagens. They probably don't exist anymore. But when I was a kid, it was a big deal.
This would be really interesting if people have comments to make on this or experiences or memories.
Love to hear it.
Yeah.
Love to hear it.
It's just fascinating how it does all connect, like you said.
Yeah. And opening the conversation. That's what I'd like to do. So let's keep talking. Let's keep wondering about this.
Yes. And with all of the different, like you said, the free energy and the water production, that goes back to this esoteric knowledge. That's also the foundations of trauma-based mind control and MK Ultra at its root, and the experiments that were being done even before MK Ultra, and, with the history that you laid out with World War II. And it's very fascinating how it all there seems to be just this, like you said, playbook that a bunch of people were very privy to. They combined all the knowledge that they could find, all these different mystery schools and mystery religions and esoteric knowledge and Satanism and everything, all these different secretive information that they combined, and then sort of sifted through it, combined a lot of it, and figured out what worked best to suit their agenda, which was slavery and, controlling people. But it all seems very related, that they got some of this knowledge from all different places, and star forts seem to be very, very interconnected with it, with its functionality and even the structure of it.
Yes. And they've used it in ways I don't think that were ever intended for any of this use. And I have a terrible feeling that our horrendous abuse and sacrifice of children is the energy that they're using for evil purposes, utilizing all of this. And we just have to stop this.
100%. And so if any of you listening have information, please comment below this video, reach out to Juliette online or myself, send some emails, let us know. I'd be really curious if you guys have personal knowledge or if you've watched different videos that might have a puzzle piece. I really do think that this is fascinating. When I first heard Juliette even mention it, I was like, wait, what's the significance of that? And she shared a little bit, and I was instantly fascinated and really wanted her to come on and share, even though we don't have all the information. The information we do have is very damning in a way. It's also secretive, even though it's right out in public. And I think that some of these things could be very important to testimony of survivors who have gone through these things. And to all of us, like Juliette said, they're sprinkled all over the US. So there has to be some connection that they have to these cities, New York City, and, even Montauk, if that's what it is, and different survivor testimonies of military bases and just these different locations and ley lines, energy and psychic abilities. And I mean, the list just goes on, but I'd be really fascinated if any of you have any information that you could provide that could maybe help us piece this together a little bit better. And of course, Juliette, her memories have been documented. I know we've talked about some of them in her past episodes. Go back and listen to those. But Juliette also has 3 amazing books where you guys can learn about some of these places that she was at. You can learn about her advocacy work. And I wanted you to share where people can connect with you, Juliette, and get your books.
Yes, you can just go to my website, which is www.julietteengel.com. So if you Google me, you'll get to my website. It's in my name. It's just my name. And you'll get my 3 books, and they're a good read. There they are.
Yep. And 2 of them have more of a testimony. And then the other one, like I said in the intro, it's sort of a thriller, but it really outlines the crime that she discovered there in Moscow and helps paint the picture for you. It's very, very amazing what Juliette's been able to remember and document for us. And I think these books are fabulous that her and others are eternalizing their stories and getting them out there. There's so many ways that history's been erased, and I think books are a way to eternalize it, especially since the internet can be throttled so easily. So her website is, as she was saying just a little bit ago, if you guys could go to www.julietteengel.com, you will find her books there and other information. And Juliette, you have a contact on here as well?
Yeah, there's a way to contact me.
Perfect. So if you guys want to reach out directly to Juliette, you guys can do that right through her website here as well. Juliette, are you on any social media that people can connect with you?
A little bit. I'll give you the show notes. I'll give you some
Perfect.
connections for the show notes. We also have a lot of good information on the website, Our Country, Our Children, and I'll give you the link to that. So quite a bit of research on the current situation of trafficking and grooming of children inside the U.S. right now. So that's an important link, and I'll make sure you have that.
And as Juliette mentioned earlier, the National Archives MK Ultra documents, I'll have that link down below as well, and starforts.com, which we were showing different screens of earlier. It's a really fascinating site, and you guys can go look at it and dive into it. The maps are pretty interactive on there. You can zoom in a lot and kind of see where they're at in your area or areas around you or in your country. Very fascinating. So I'll have that in the show notes also. I'll have Juliette's books, her contact information, any other links that she wants to share with you guys. And Juliette, was there anything else that you wanted to share today before we close up?
Nope, I'm good. I think we've started the conversation.
We did. Hopefully we can have a part 2 with what people are reaching out to you with and sharing. So again, you guys, comment below, reach out. We couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you found value in this, please share the episode. It would help a lot to help get this information out and maybe help reach other people who could have information. I'll have Juliette's playlist in the show notes as well if you missed any of her past episodes, which definitely please go back and listen and go support her. So you guys, thank you so much for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.